Quite a few people I know who've left the church and their faith did so because of the hypocrisy they found in the Christians they met. What is a hypocrite? And are they a good reason to abandon faith in God? Hi, I'm Kirk, and I'm a scientist and a philosopher and a person who spends a lot of time thinking about the why questions in life. So if you're interested in discussions pertaining to God, science, and life, then please subscribe to my channel here where I'll be posting on a regular basis. You can also subscribe to my social media accounts, and the links are below. One of my boys used to be involved in some pretty challenging off-road bicycling until he compressed some vertebrae in the back of his neck after a bad landing at the bottom of a small cliff that he and his friends were enjoying. Anyways, he would often go to a hydro-cut line that was a popular spot for off-road cycling. In addition to the serious cyclists testing their skills on the trails, there were what my son called posers. Posers were guys who had spent a lot of money on a high-end off-road bicycle and all the fancy gear to go with it, but who just stood around looking impressive while doing very little cycling. They talked and looked like serious high-end cyclists, but if they did any cycling at all, it was only to do a little bit of riding on the easy parts of the trail. These were the posers. A hypocrite is a special kind of poser, and they are all around us. I will offer two reasons why hypocrites are actually irrelevant when it comes to evaluating the integrity and truth of Christianity. But first, I'd like to describe three kinds of hypocrites. I would not equate an off-road cyclist poser with a hypocrite for the reason that there is not a significant moral or ethical position that they're claiming to make. They might be what we call a wannabe, but they might be going so far as to be misrepresenting their skill level without outright lying about it. But when we talk about hypocrites, we're talking about a more significant moral or ethical violation or an outright lie that is taking place. Hypocrites are found anywhere there are causes that involve decisions, beliefs, or policies that pertain to right and wrong, good or bad, or moral and ethical positions. Thus, there are hypocrites in politics, in environmental movements, and in social justice causes, as well as in religion. In each case, a hypocrite is a poser whose private life contradicts the public causes they represent. I could give you quite a few examples all around us, but I'd rather build bridges than make a lot of enemies. So let's just focus on what I might call the top three kinds of religious hypocrites. Then we'll look at what we should infer from their existence. In number three position would be a hypocrite who honestly and sincerely tries to follow Christ, but there is a serious moral weakness in their life that they're trying unsuccessfully to deal with despite their best efforts, and they hope no one will find out. Sooner or later, someone finds out and they are publicly shamed by the media and the world, or at least by the circle of people who know them. For example, several years ago, I met with a student who very much wanted to grow in his relationship with God, and I believe he was very sincere in his desire. But unbeknownst to me or anyone else, he had an addiction he was fighting that he did not want anyone to know about. One day he had a technical issue with his laptop and sent it in for repair. The shop found child porn on his laptop and notified the police immediately. To his shock, police suddenly showed up, arrested him, and everything went public. I am sure that many people who knew that he claimed to be a Christian shook their head in disgust and said to themselves, "What a hypocrite." This is the least worst type of hypocrite because the person is desperately and honestly trying to get victory over some secret addiction or weakness, while earnestly hoping that no one finds out. I have a lot of compassion for people who struggle with addictions, and if this is you, I implore you to talk to someone you trust and get help. In number two position would be a person who wants a relationship with God and admires Christ, but disagrees with certain things Christ talked about, or finds certain teachings in the Bible to be unacceptable to themselves or to the culture that they live in. Therefore, they choose the bits they agree with and reinterpret the parts that they do not like. The result is a tailor-made God and a modified Christianity that is acceptable to their culture. They are not called out by our culture because it is culture itself that shapes their version of God and Christianity. But there are two sources that do call them out, surprisingly, at the opposite ends of the spectrum. At one end of the spectrum was Jesus Christ when he spoke of people who would claim to follow at least the values of Christ, but in fact did not follow Christ himself. Jesus said to this kind of hypocrite, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" On Judgment Day, he said that there will be many people who firmly believed that they had followed Christ, but will be totally shocked when he says to them, "I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness." By the term lawlessness, he was not talking about running wild in the streets, breaking criminal law. When God talks about lawlessness, he is speaking of people who do what is right in their own opinion, or according to what the culture thinks is right or wrong, rather than what God has commanded. It is hypocrisy to claim to follow Christ when in fact what one follows is a culturally approved version of Christ and God. At the other end of the spectrum, calling out this kind of hypocrite, and perhaps not too surprisingly, are some completely secular critical thinkers. Some years ago, I was surprised to see Canadian satirical columnist Ellen Fotheringham, in a featured column in Maclean's magazine, write a scathing piece stating that such Christians had lost all credibility precisely because they merely followed the culture. In the number one position is the type of hypocrite that people seem to have the most contempt for. It is a person who has no intention or desire whatsoever for authentic Christianity, but pretends to be a Christian to pursue their own agenda. It could be for political, business, or personal gains. For example, and without mentioning names, there are one or two evangelists who have been exposed over the past couple of decades for living an extravagant, luxurious, and immoral private life, while at the same time presenting themselves as spokesmen for God. Over the course of my life, and after talking personally with 1,000 or 2,000 students, it is difficult to say which type of hypocrisy has turned off or subverted the faith of the most people. But hypocrisy in all its forms has had a massive impact. It leaves behind a bad taste. Perhaps the most immediate impact hypocrites have in the lives of others is a subjective distaste for anything the hypocrite claimed that they stood for. Hypocrites who claim to be a Christian, for example, leave others with a subconscious or a subjective distaste for Christianity. When you actually think carefully about Christian hypocrites, however, there are at least two reasons why they are actually irrelevant to the truth and integrity of legit Christianity, and I mean legit. Recently online, I have seen people who pretend to be doctors or medical professionals, but they're not. They are deliberately deceiving people. It does not logically follow that because there are people pretending to be doctors, that therefore all doctors are fake or that medical science is rubbish. In exactly the same way, my first reason as to why hypocrites are irrelevant to the truth of God and Christianity is that it does not follow that because there are hypocrites pretending to be Christians that therefore there are no legit Christians or that Christianity is rubbish. Jesus once said, with regard to people who claim to follow God, "You will know them by their fruit." One of the reasons people have given me for rejecting Christianity is the many clergymen who have made the news by sexually assaulting young boys. After listening to them express their disgust and after expressing my own revulsion at what those men have done, I asked them the question, is that what Jesus taught? Did Jesus actually teach his followers to sexually assault young boys? I cannot say how many times I've asked that question during a conversation, but the answer is the same every time. No. Legit Christianity is defined by Jesus Christ, not by hypocrites, or even by sincere Christians who badly mess up. So next time you encounter a hypocrite who calls himself a Christian, ask yourself 2 questions. First, does it logically follow that because this person right here is a hypocrite, that therefore Christianity is rubbish? And second, ask yourself the question, is this what Jesus taught? Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, or at least found it thought-provoking. And if you did, please share it, or you can leave a comment in the section below. And also, don't forget to hit the like button.